Hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome back to Hope City, Arkansas Online for our August online experience. I'm Adam. You may not know him. This is Gabe Hoagland. He is our family ministry director here for Northwest Arkansas. And so, Gabe, I'd love for people just to get to know you a little bit, man. Tell us who you are, a little bit about you.
So, like you said, my name's Gabe. I got married 2 months ago, and life has been a little crazy, but it's been awesome to hop in down here and just join the family and join this community. It's been great.
Yeah, you started a new job.
Yes.
You got married.
Yes.
And now you're moving literally this week to Northwest Arkansas. Nothing stressful going on in life, right?
Nothing at all. No, we're good.
Yeah. Now, I would love to hear, man, and I think people watching would love to hear too. What's your favorite part about Northwest Arkansas so far?
So far, probably has been getting just to know the community better and just getting to meet some awesome people that I can't wait to grow relationships with and just get to be around and have fun with, man. That's been the best part.
Yeah, and man, what you're talking about, that's what we fell in love with this community too, is just people are great. The people are real, genuine, and along those lines, that's why we wanted to come start a church here. We wanted to create spaces for relationships and conversations and to get rid of all the barriers between people and Jesus. Let them get up close with him and get to know him. So if there's anything in this video that you're like, man, this is good, this is worth sharing with my friends, man, be sure to like this, be sure to share it on your feed. Comment below, let us know where you're watching from, or even if there's something that stood out to you as we're going through our experience today. We would love for you to drop a comment and all that. And if you want to get connected with us, we got some ways that you can do that as well. We got some things coming up, Gabe, that, man, if you want to give us a rundown of that, and then we'll talk about how people can just get involved.
For sure. Next Sunday, we're actually having our next in-person meeting here, actually where we're shooting right now, at the after-school program at 10 a.m. It's been awesome. All the information for that will be linked below in the comments section, so if you want to check that out, it's an awesome time just to come here and be in community with us. We're also having a party later this month, in August 28th at 6:05. We're going back to the baseball fields. We're going to watch the Naturals again. We had so much fun last time that we're going back again. And it's just an awesome time to be there and have fun, man.
And tickets are free. But you got to register for that. All the details, like Gabe said, are in the comments below. Be sure to check that out. But if you want to get involved with us, you have questions, you want to connect with us, maybe grab coffee with Gabe or me or lunch or whatever that looks like, we got a couple ways you can do that. First, you can go to hopefornwa.city/connect and fill out that connect form right there. That's a great way for us to communicate back and forth. The other thing you could do is just drop a comment below or message us on here, and we'll follow up with you and would love to have you get involved. As a church, we do a few things a month. We gather together, and that's what Gabe was talking about. We throw parties and we find ways to serve the community, and so we believe that life lived together is just better that way. It's just a better way to do life. And so around that, we would love to go beyond just the screen and connect in person. But for our online experience today, what you can expect is we've got some teaching around what it looks like to live out our mission as a church. We're going to talk about that more here in a minute. The other thing you can expect is we've got some music that's involved, and then just opportunities that if you're not part of a church, want to be part of a church, not even sure if you like church, but you're going, man, I think I could hang with these guys. We would love to connect with you. So stick around to the end, and we'll have some ways you can take some next steps if you want to. But glad you're here. We're going to jump into this month's talk. This is how we make an impact in our community and ultimately in the next generation. Well, hey, this summer we've been looking at how we live out our mission as a church, and that's to help people experience Jesus. And we think that when we experience Jesus, he changes our lives, and then he changes our lives with a purpose in mind. His purpose is that we would impact generations with his hope. Now, we've looked at this summer. We said that Jesus is a person who's meant to be experienced. And around Hope City, we say it this way, man, many of us have experienced church, but in the mix of weird rules or religion, like maybe we've never had the chance to experience Jesus like for real. But what Jesus came to offer, it wasn't more regulations or rules or religion. What he came to offer us was a relationship. And when we experience Jesus, he doesn't just leave us where he found us. What Jesus does is he actually starts to change our lives. But what we looked at last month was this, that life change, it comes with a cost. See, with Jesus, he always leads us to a better way to do life. And that means giving up something in order to gain the better life that he has for us. But look, even if we decide that cost isn't worth it, or it gets hard and we go back to the familiar, Jesus never gives up on us. He never gives up on us, no matter how far gone we think we are or how much we give up along the way. Instead, Jesus says that we are his masterpiece. He considers us his best work. And yes, we are a work in progress, but he's created us on purpose and for a purpose. And that's what we're going to talk about today, right, Gabe? Jesus wants us to experience him. And as he changes our lives, he gives our lives a new purpose. He's actually inviting us into the kind of life that will impact generations with his hope. So specifically, what we want to talk about, Gabe, is like the generation we can impact. And that is literally the next generation. We have the opportunity today to create spaces and environments where the next generation gets to experience Jesus, where he changes their lives. And then what we believe will happen is they go on and impact generation after generation after generation and on and on and on. Yep. Gabe, that's your role here at Hope City, right, man? Yeah. Your focus is on impacting the next generation. So I would love for everybody watching just to get to hear a little bit of your story, because I feel like your story ties directly into who we are as a church and the type of impact we want to make on the next generation.
Yeah. So when I think about my story, I just think about how God provided people in the right time and at the right moment to speak truth and love into my life.
Yeah, man.
And even when it didn't seem like he was doing it, or he didn't even care, or didn't have a plan, like it still went through. Yeah. And God chose to answer it through these people. I think about, and I grew up in a house where it was pretty normal. Like, I would say a pretty normal childhood. My mom, my grandparents, they were all really devout Christians. They went to church every Sunday. We were always there, always involved, doing everything. Yeah. And it just seemed normal. And then in 5th and 6th grade, like, a lot of things changed, and my life looked a little different. We moved from a big city to a small town, and I was already the new kid, so that's hard to be enough as a middle schooler. But on top of that, my grandpa got his first diagnosis with cancer, and it just started this battle for years over his health and his life, really. And then on top of all of this, my parents decided to separate and get a divorce, and it all happened during this time, and I was just left like, what is happening, God? Like, what's going on?
And you're in middle school.
Yeah, I mean, middle school's hard enough. Yeah. Middle school's hard enough, but these things just kept piling on and piling on. And then even going in, I just decided, you know what? I'm going to lean into what God has. I'm going to be super involved. I'm going to get back into it. I'm going to go to youth group all the time and just pour myself into the church. And what happened was my situation didn't really change. Yeah. Like, it felt like no matter what I was doing, it didn't matter.
So like your grandpa's still sick, parents are still divorced.
Yes, nothing changed. So I just decided, you know what? I'm just going to go the opposite way. I'm going to do what I want. And in high school, and even into like my later years in high school, I was just doing whatever I wanted. I wasn't going to church. I wasn't even listening to the people around me, pouring truth into me. I was just going through the motions. And it was in that moments, like, my grandpa actually passed away during this time. And that just, even on top of everything, was like the cherry on the cake. It was just like, God, like, you don't care right now. Yeah. And through a bunch of people coming into my life, and a lot of people speaking truth and stepping out in faith, I realized that God did have a plan. Yeah. And he answered that plan. And he did love me and cared about me. He answered it with people like my mom, my grandma, my grandpa, my youth pastors, Charlie Landis and Caleb Hutchcraft, my youth sponsors, Jerry Dale and Skylar Davis, all these people that God placed in my life at the right time, in the right moment, speaking truth into my life. Yeah. And even if they didn't know it, and I didn't realize it in the moment either, like, that changed me and impacted me so deeply. And I probably wouldn't be here today without those people. I don't think I would.
Yeah, man. No, that's good. Thanks for sharing that. Yeah. Gabe, I bet for each of those people you just talked about that God sent into your life, chances are in the moment they probably didn't even realize the impact they were making. If they were being honest, they probably couldn't see like how they were impacting your life. And I think for a lot of us, when we think about our lives, we ask this question, like, what difference am I really making? I think about people like in my stage of life, parents with kids, like, what difference does it really make when I change a diaper for the 1,000th time, or I wipe another poopy butt, or answer more questions like, Dad, why did God make mosquitoes? I don't know. Ask him one day, right?
That's a great question.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah. And even like people who are influencing the children, this next generation, specifically teachers, like, especially in the year that we had, like, I know a lot of them are wondering, like, am I really making a difference when I'm teaching these kids remotely or who aren't even in school? Yeah. And are these tests even mattering when it comes to, like, the impact I'm having on these kids?
Yeah. Or, I think about grandparents. I hear this from my parents, like, this is where the fun starts, right? But let's be honest, like, your grandkids, they kind of wear you out sometimes, don't they? And your kids, they don't parent the way that you did. At least that's what my parents tell me anyway. Yeah. And you have to wonder sometimes, am I really making a difference?
Yeah. And then kids, like, you may not have kids, you may not like kids, you may not even think they like you. Like, what impact can you really have on this generation? What difference can I really make?
And here's the answer, Gabe, and it's really depressing. On your own, you can make no difference. nothing. In fact, that's what Jesus promised us. He said that what seems impossible will stay impossible apart from him. But with Jesus, here's what's true. Anything is possible. In John chapter 15, verse 5, Jesus compared our lives with him to grapes growing on a vine. I mean, Jesus was always using these analogies from real life to explain something deeper on a spiritual level. Jesus says this in John chapter 15, verse 5. He says, I am the vine and you are the branches. If you remain in me and I in you, you will bear much fruit. But apart from me, you can do nothing. See, when you think about fruit, right, and it's growing on a vine, it's dependent on that vine for its ability to bear fruit. So like if a branch gets cut off of a grapevine or an apple tree, like how many grapes or apples can that branch produce?
Probably none.
Yeah, nothing, right? And Jesus says that our lives are the same apart from him. We can do nothing. We can't produce anything good. But when we experience him and he changes our lives, our best shot at becoming who he created us to be, to making an impact on generations to come, it's by remaining or living in him. And when we remain and live in Jesus, he promises us that we will bear much fruit. And this is like a Bible way of saying that we'll make a lasting impact in the world. See, when bearing fruit, if you read that phrase in the Bible, it's always a metaphor of impact and multiplication. Because a tree or a vine that bore fruit, it continued not to produce like just one grape or one apple, but it produced seeds, right? Seeds that when they were planted in the ground, it produced more grapevines or more trees that produced fruit for generation after generation after generation. And that's the type of impact Jesus wants to make through us. So when we follow Jesus, he also gives us this gift called the Holy Spirit. It's literally Jesus living in us and teaching us how to live our everyday lives as if they were his. So it's like this. If Jesus worked my job, how would he show up? Or if he was married to my spouse, how would he handle this conflict? If Jesus was the parent to my kids, or he lived in my singleness, or he lived next door to this neighbor, and you know the neighbor, the weird neighbor I'm talking about, if Jesus lived my life, how would he do this? That's what the Holy Spirit wants to do in us. And that's ultimately what bearing fruit looks like. So when we talk about making an impact on the next generation, the best shot we have of making that kind of impact, a lasting impact, is when we remain in Jesus. So Gabe, that does bring the question, like Jesus, we got to look at what he says, but man, why does the next generation matter so much? I mean, just even practically to us today.
That's a great question.
Yeah. I
think if we look at statistics today, we can see like within the last 10 years, church dropout rates have risen by 10% from the last generation. 36% of young adults today and teens, they feel like they aren't able to ask questions at church about their faith. 27% of adults and teens don't feel like that the church has helped them with their doubts or insecurities in their faith. And even another 20% think that the church has done nothing, or even their faith has done nothing to help their mental illness.
And that's even on the rise if you think about the last year that we've had, right?
Oh, it's been a crazy year. And these stats don't seem to be getting any better. But what I see in my generation and the generation after is this call for change and this awesome opportunity we have to impact them and transition them out of making them less of these statistics and making them more of the statistics that point back to Christ.
That's right.
Because when we remember with all of these things like Jesus, anything is possible. With Jesus, anything's possible.
That's right, man. That's right at the heart of who we want to be as a church, because when we talk about some of these statistics, we want to be a church where it's okay to ask questions. It's okay to have doubts. It's okay to work through, like, not everything being right mentally, physically, emotionally, whatever. We're a safe place to process through that stuff and get to know Jesus. And I love how you just said it, Gabe, because with Jesus, what seems impossible isn't. Anything is possible. But in order to make an impact on generations, it starts with one generation, and we're looking at the next generation. So we want to look at this question together. What difference can we make as a church in this next generation? And so a lot of what we're going to talk about today, it was shaped through a book called Kids Matter by a pastor named Scott Pugh. So if any of this resonates with you, or if you want to dive deeper into this, you can check out that book and you can learn more through that. But if you spend any time with Jesus, like if you were one of the people that was physically with him in his day, you would see this. But for us today, sometimes if we don't slow down enough, if we're reading the Bible or we're reading the stories about Jesus, we miss this point, that there is one group of people that specifically Jesus seems to care about an awful lot. Again, we can miss it if we're just reading through the Bible and we don't slow down enough and pay attention. But that group of people is actually kids. In fact, one of the times that Jesus, Gabe, got the most angry, the time that he got the most upset with some of his closest friends was around how they treated kids. In Mark chapter 10, verses 13 and 14, it says this, that people, likely parents, they were bringing little children to Jesus for him to place his hands on them, just like to bless them. But the disciples rebuked the parents who were bringing the kids. They're like, get away. When Jesus saw this, though, he was indignant. So if you can picture this, here's this group of parents with their kids, and they really want to get their kids to experience Jesus. As a dad, I can identify with that. But the people closest to Jesus kept saying, no, Jesus doesn't have time for people like you. Like, your kids aren't important enough. Jesus is too busy making a bigger impact in the world. And in case you didn't get the memo, he's kind of the savior of the world. Like, he's got a pretty big job to do, so your kids are just going to have to wait. But that's not how Jesus views kids. See, the problem was in that culture, kids, they weren't considered nearly as important as what they are today. The center of life and culture, it oriented around men. In ancient Rome and Israel, their culture was a man's world. Women and children were an afterthought in most scenarios. So at the very least, the disciples would have interpreted these kids coming in this request. At the very least, they would have said, this is annoying. Like, Jesus doesn't have time for this. And at worst, they would say that Jesus is just too important to waste his time with your kids. I mean, can you imagine? But what did Jesus do in this scenario? It says that he was indignant. It literally means he was ticked off, like he was angry. Why? Because they wouldn't let the kids come be with him. See, in this moment, Jesus was letting his disciples and us today know that he really cares about kids, and they're really important to God, and they're really important to God's plan for the world. So let me ask you this question for you. What do you get angry about? What really gets you fired up? What breaks your heart? And take a minute and think about that. Because the starting point of passion, of wanting to see a difference in the world, of wanting to make an impact that lasts for generations, that thing that fires you up, that thing that wakes you up in the morning, that passion inside you, that's where Jesus may just want to use you and work through you to make an impact on generations to come. See, for Jesus, what made him angry was when people acted like kids didn't matter. In fact, Jesus, Gabe, he made it even more clear about how he felt about kids in Matthew chapter 19, didn't he?
Yeah, in verses 14 and 15, they say, Jesus said, let the little children come to me and do not hinder them, for the kingdom of heaven belongs to such as these. Yeah. When he had placed his hands on them, he went on from there. See, Jesus would often take the time to address the selfishness and pride of the people he was around by pointing to the way that children are. The fact that they so humbly trust and serve the people above them. You see, Jesus was constantly turning the idea of what people had a king was supposed to be and did and said, and even how they led. And in that way, he loved and found the value in children around him. And he was able to not only turn the perception of what people thought of him as the leader, as the king, but how the kingdom that he served was going to look as well.
That's good, man.
Yeah, you see, when Christ says that the kingdom belongs to people who approach like kids, more questions than answers. Don't have it all together. Sometimes they are kind of funny and say and do some silly things, but he's saying on top of that, they're genuine. Yeah. Just how children are.
Just real, right?
Yes. Yeah. There's so much for us as adults to understand when it comes to approaching life like this. Yeah. And it makes me think back to this story I heard from this pastor who was baptizing his kid. And the kid was 7 years old, and the pastor wasn't sure if his kid was ready or not. And he looked at his son and he said, son, why do you want to get baptized? Yeah. The son took a second and he said, Dad, it's because Jesus loves me and he died for me. Wow. And sometimes it takes a child to really show us the most important part of our faith, to remind us of what's important, what's genuine, and what real love looks like. Yeah. And so what can you learn from kids in this way? But Jesus, he wasn't done there yet. No, not only did we learn that when we enter the kingdom, we enter like kids, but Jesus is going to double down on this concept. And not only who belongs in heaven, but he's going to challenge everyone with who is the greatest in the kingdom. Right, Adam? Yeah,
so Jesus is going to pick up in Matthew chapter 18, verses 1 through 4. And it's this crazy scenario. It says that at this time, the disciples came to Jesus and they asked him, who's the greatest in the kingdom of heaven, Jesus? Translation, Jesus, which one of us is your favorite? Would you pick a favorite and tell us which one is most important to you? And in response, he called a little child to him and he placed the child among them, just sat him in a circle. And he said, truly, I tell you, unless you change and become like little children, you will never enter the kingdom of heaven. Therefore, whoever takes the lowly position of this child is the greatest in the kingdom of heaven. And then if you skip down a few more verses to verse 10, it says this. It says, Jesus told him, see that you do not despise one of these little ones. See, in this moment, Jesus is communicating a couple of key points. Not only do we, as you said, Gabe, approach Jesus with the simplicity of a child, more questions and answers, not having it all figured out, But children matter to Jesus, and their approach to faith matters so much to Jesus that he picks out a child out of this crowd of people as the example of who is the greatest in the kingdom. I mean, think about that. Again, in that culture and context, this would have been shocking because it was a man's world where men held the power and where the center of society, especially in the family, like the center was the man. So much so that when a baby was born into an ancient Roman family, get this, that baby was placed on the ground at birth. Not given to his mother, but placed on the ground. Then it was up to the baby's father, the man of the house, to decide if that baby was worth keeping or not. To decide if that baby made the cut to be part of the family. If the baby was strong enough, healthy enough, whatever. If the father picked the baby up, he was accepting the baby into his family. But if he didn't and the baby laid there, it was taken outside and abandoned. It was left for dead, or the baby would be picked up and raised as a slave. And even then, after a baby had been accepted, even if they made the cut, they're in the family, if a child made his father angry, the father had the right to disown them. Some of you, maybe your dad threatened you with that, I'm going to disown you. But it was real. They go, hey, you don't have any right here. Or they're sold into slavery, or worse, they're killed. And when it comes to who's the greatest in the kingdom of heaven, Jesus picks up a child, and he brings him to the center, and he goes, this is what it looks like. So in this moment, when Jesus places a child at the center of who is the greatest in the kingdom, then continues on instructing people that they must not even despise a child, he's making a statement. He's making a statement on how important kids are to him and ultimately how important they are to God. See, kids are at the center of God's plan for the world. Let me say that again. Kids are at the center of God's plan for the world and his plan to impact generations. But this idea didn't stop with Jesus. See, I heard a story one time that in the 4th century, a few hundred years later, the Roman emperor at the time, he issued a decree stating that the Christians were actually undermining and undoing the very foundations of the Roman Empire. And it wasn't because they were fighting a war. It wasn't because they were starting riots or rebelling. No, this emperor, get this, he said that Christians were undermining the empire because of how they took care of these throwaway kids, the kids that didn't make the cut. The Christians would go pick them up and take them in and raise them. Christians were undoing Roman culture by how they loved and how they looked after widows and orphans, how they looked after the weak and the powerless. Where did they learn this? Well, I think it went back to these moments that the first followers of Jesus had with him. And then they passed that on to the next generation. And then the next generation picked it up. Then the next generation. And ultimately, we sit here today in Northwest Arkansas because these followers of Jesus took this seriously, that the next generation really matters. Yeah, really here's how Jesus modeled that. Just real simply, right? He cared for kids. But it was one kid at a time, one conversation, one relationship, one family at a time. He made time for kids, and he elevated the worth and value of every human who was ever created in the image of God. But he placed a special emphasis on the next generation. See, Jesus' mission, it was always to save the world. It was always to impact generations. But the way he's chosen to do that is through people. It's through us, you and me. And the same is still true for us today. Jesus wants to make that impact on your life so that you can impact someone else's life. It's one person at a time, though. So I would just ask this question. Who's your one person? Gabe, back to your story, this principle. Yeah. It's ultimately what God used to show you that he cared about you and that you weren't alone, right? You were one kid that needed to know that you mattered. What did that look like?
I mean, it was just each time I was with somebody or each conversation I had, each moment with people who showed me I mattered to them, it made me feel and understand that God did care about me. It was these people that stepped out in faith and followed God's instruction for the next generation that showed me I mattered to God. It was the right people at the right time being placed by God in the right position.
That's right.
To show me that God cared about me.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah. So Gabe, I guess the question back to you then that I would like to ask is, man, why do you want to make an impact on the next generation? Ultimately, why would you sign up to be part of a church plant in Northwest Arkansas, and why are you here today?
It's a question I've thought a lot about, but I want to impact the next generation because I was lucky enough to have people placed around me and people that stepped out in faith, pouring God's love and truth into my life. And I never want another kid or teenager to have to feel that same way I felt and not have someone speaking truth into them. That everyone should have the opportunity to hear this.
Yeah. And that's right at the heart of who we are as a church. We want to create the spaces for kids that maybe don't think that they matter or they don't know that they're not alone. And if we're going to impact generations as a church, we know it starts with the next generation. Jesus really cares about kids. And he cared about you, Gabe, when you were a kid. He cared about you in a really vulnerable moment, didn't he? And he made it very real for you. And for me, I haven't even had a chance to share my story, but Jesus cared for me when I said that I hated him and I ran away. And ultimately, we're two kids who sit here as adults today because the right people at the right time made a difference in our lives in the right way. And it was all because they trusted Jesus to make an impact in our lives. Yeah. And so needless to say, as a church, man, we really care about the next generation. Yeah, so back to our question, how do we impact generations? Well, we said it starts with the next generation. And how do we impact the next generation? Yeah. It starts small. And it may even at times feel like this. What difference am I really making? But Gabe, Hope City Church here in Arkansas, we're coming here, we're planting, we've got a vision and hope for the future. What does it look like for this church to make a difference in this community?
So when I think about that, I think about our environment that we're creating for our kids in the church.
It's literally here at the after-school program location.
Right where we're shooting.
Yep, I-49 and Sunset.
It's an awesome space. And we're going to set ourselves with a high expectation, and we're going to reach that expectation. We're going to create a safe, loving, and awesome environment where kids can have fun, where parents know they're safe. Yeah. But at the end of the day, they both know that they're going to get impacted by Jesus in one way or another. And that's our goal.
And beyond that, they're going to have adults that are going to jump into their lives, right, man, and just start investing in them, like we were just talking about.
People that were like in my life, where they're just going to step into what God is leading them and where God is telling them, and they're just going to pour into your children, into the children, into this next generation.
And even beyond that, we want to make an impact in this community. And so one of the ways that we do that is serving schools. Like our approach is we want to influence the influencers. We want to impact the teachers and the staff and the principals and the administrators who are with kids every single day. We're actually forming a partnership with Tyson Elementary, and we're doing some landscaping and things like that for them. We also have an opportunity coming up in September, and we're going to get more information your way on this as we get closer to the date. But one of the things we're learning about this community is tons of kids go home and they don't know where their next meal is going to come from, especially at the end of a school week. Like they go home on the weekends and they don't know if there's going to be food there. It's called food insecurity, and it's a big deal in our community. And so we're going to partner with an organization called the Samaritan Community Center, and we're going to have the opportunity to pack some meals to make sure every kid knows that they're noticed and that they're cared for and that they're loved and that they're fed on the weekends. Yeah. So I know that a lot of us watching, and maybe even for me personally, I go, man, that's what our church is doing. Hey, good for you guys. But what about me? How do I make a difference personally in the next generation?
Yeah, I think it starts with thinking about what we've been asking throughout this entire video. It's like, what makes you angry? Yeah. What breaks your heart? Like, what do we learn from kids and how they approach life, Jesus, and even their faith?
It's simple, right?
Yeah. And we got to learn from the early church that generational impact started by valuing life in kids where no one else did. Yeah. Like looking at the kids that didn't have friends and saying, I'm going to be with them.
That's right. And so, Gabe, for a guy like you or somebody that maybe isn't married, somebody without kids, how do you make an impact?
I think, there's a couple really good ways you can do that. Like, I'm sure everybody that's not married or is married and doesn't have kids, I'm sure you know somebody that has kids. Yes. And that they need a break. So offering to give them, go babysit somebody. Yeah. Go sit with their kids. Let them go out and go sit with kids and have uninterrupted time with them. Volunteering at your local youth centers or projects like Big Brother and Big Sister, those are awesome. And even volunteering here with our church, our kids, I'm always looking for more people to jump in and have fun and hang out and play games and build blocks and teach these kids about Jesus and pour into them.
Yeah, you have something to offer to kids. Yes. Yeah. Beyond that, as a parent, I think about this, that if you are a parent, I'll give you one principle that God's teaching me big time right now, is just slow down and take time. Like my son, he's been asking me to go out back and throw the football or throw baseball with them. And sometimes I'm on my phone and I'm too busy or I'm too consumed. I think that what I'm doing with planting this church is too important that I'm not even making time for my own kids. And what God's really impacting my life with right now is, dude, put your phone away and go play football with them. Even when it's 100 degrees, 100% humidity, and mosquitoes are out, all that stuff, just go out back and play. So parents, just make time, take an hour just to sit and be, or an hour to play with your kids. That could be the biggest impact you make on the next generation. And one other thing that I would add in there is, one of my favorite pastors, Andy Stanley, says it this way: do for one what you wish you could do for everyone. So what difference do you hope to make? What generational impact do you want to make? Think about one person one kid that you could do that for. Whatever that difference is you want to make, do for one what you wish you could do for everyone. That's how this idea of multiplication starts.
Yeah.
And I see this idea of impacting generations, this idea of multiplication, it's always been God's plan for the world. See, God called the nation of Israel out of slavery in Egypt. After 400 years in slavery, God brought them to a place, and he's getting ready to take them into the promised land. But he told the people to pass on these types of commands to their kids and to their children after, so that they would get to enjoy the life that God had for them. See, impacting generations, even going back to the very beginning, it always has been God's plan for the world. The Israelites, they were even given this prayer that they were to pray over each other and over their families and over their children. And this prayer, it goes like this. You maybe have heard it because it's been turned into a song now.
Yeah.
But in Numbers chapter 6, verses 24 through 26, it says this: "The Lord bless you and keep you. The Lord make his face shine on you and be gracious to you. The Lord turn his face toward you and give you peace." And so when you think about that, I mean, isn't that what you want for the next generation? See, that's God's heart for us as people. It always has been and always will be. And so now we're going to sing a song that's based on that prayer. It's our prayer for you. And it's our prayer for the next generation as a church. And as we sing this song, man, maybe you just take this song in and let these words just kind of soak in. But if it becomes your prayer as well, maybe you sing it, whether you're in the car driving down the road or you're in your living room. But ultimately, God wants to bless you, keep you. He wants to give you his peace. He wants that to go generation after generation after generation.
Yep.
Sing together today. The Lord bless you and keep you, make his face shine upon you, be gracious to you. The Lord turn his face towards you and give you peace. Come on, we respond together today as we sing. Amen. 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 We worship you, God. Amen.
favor be upon you and 1,000 generations, and your family, and your children, and their children, and their children. May his favor be upon you and 1,000 generations, and your family, and your children, and their children, and their children. May his favor be upon you and 1,000 generations, and your family, and your children, and their children, and their children. May his favor be upon you and 1,000 generations, and your family, and your children, and their children, and their children. May his presence go before you and behind you and beside you, all around you and within you. He is with you, he is with you in the morning, in the evening, in your coming and your going, in your weeping and rejoicing. He is for you, 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 he is for you.
Come on, every voice. Oh, amen. Amen. Oh, we give you praise.
Hey, thanks again for being here today. We're literally sitting in a space called the After School Program. This is where we gather on the weekends. And Gabe, we got a gathering coming up next Sunday, right, man?
Yeah, next Sunday, August 15th, we're
Yep.
going to be meeting here, 10 a.m. to noon. It's going to
Yep.
be awesome. It'll be a great way to come experience this community, experience what God's doing here in Northwest Arkansas.
That's right, man.
And then later this month, we've got another chance for you to just have fun and experience our community in just a great environment. We're going back to the baseball fields, going to go see another Naturals game. The game time is around 6 o'clock.
Yeah, man.
Tickets are free, but we only have 100 of them, so if you could register online to let us know you're coming, RSVP, give us a couple of numbers of who's coming with you.
Yep.
That'll help us a lot.
Yep, all those details are in the comments below. And if you want to connect with us outside of like a gathering or, a party, baseball game or whatever, we'd love to grab coffee with you, sit down, hear your story, do lunch or something like that sometime. Again, you can drop a comment below. You can message us on here. You can go to hopefornwa.city/connect. And we'd just love to get to know you. Thanks again for being here today. Hope this time has been really good, really impactful for you and your family. And we would love to have you join us at some point in person as we look to impact the next generation.
Yeah.
Awesome. Thanks, guys.